Okay, the meeting of the Special Transition Committee to 14 wards is now commencing. Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Alderwoman Davis. Alderman Vaccaro.
She can share it with everybody, the map.
Alderwoman Ingracia.
Present.
Alderwoman Boyd.
There any
Alderman Bosley.
questions, Mr. Ramon,
Alderwoman Middlebrook. Alderwoman Rice.
that has any questions of Mr. Ramon?
Alderman Todd.
Present.
Alderman Page. Alderman Stevens.
Here.
Alderwoman Schweitzer.
Present.
Alderman Grass.
Here.
Alderwoman Walker.
Present.
Chair Green.
Present.
Alderwoman Davis. Alderman Vaccaro. Alderwoman Boyd. Alderman Bosley. Alderwoman Middlebrook. Alderwoman Rice. Alderman Page. We have 7 present. We have a quorum.
Wonderful. With that, we are going to take a recess though until Public Safety Committee adjourns, as many of our committee members are still on that committee, and I want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to see the presentation. So tentatively, let's hope that we're back by 2:30, but let's go ahead and take a recess until that committee is done.
Chair, President Green, did you want to take the minutes first and then recess after, or you wanted to do the minutes when we come back?
Let's just do the minutes when we come back.
Okay.
All right, we'll see you back in a little bit. Okay, the special committee on the transition to 14 wards will now commence. Let's see, I think we left off at approval of the minutes. I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes from Thursday, January 23rd or 26th.
So moved.
I need a second on that.
Second.
Thank you, Alderman Todd. It's been moved and seconded. The moved by the Alderwoman from the 6th, seconded by the Alderman from the 18th. We approve the minutes from Thursday, January 26, 2023. Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Alderwoman Davis. Alderman Vaccaro.
And who enforces curfew? The police department.
Alderwoman Ingracia.
Aye.
With that,
Alderwoman Boyd. Alderman Bosley. Alderwoman Middlebrook. Alderwoman Rice.
Aye.
Alderman Todd.
Aye.
Alderman Page. Alderman Stevens. Alderwoman Schweitzer. Alderman Grass.
Aye.
Alderwoman Walker.
Aye.
Chair Green.
Aye.
President Green. Alderwoman Davis. Alderman Vaccaro. Alderwoman Boyd.
Alderwoman Davis, I hope you're feeling
Alderman
better.
Bosley. Alderwoman Middlebrook. Alderman Page. Alderman Stevens. Alderwoman Schweitzer. We have 6 aye votes.
Your vote used to state a motion to approve the minutes from Thursday, January 26th. All right, for today, we are going to continue our discussion about ward capital. Everybody was emailed out and it's in the drive as well, a committee substitute for Board Bill 183, and would like to take that up before us. But I think Alderwoman Boyd is not here, so could I, so I can present on the bill, could I turn it over to Alderwoman Rice?
Sure, that's fine. Great. So President Green, you're recognized on Board Bill 183.
Wonderful. I would like to bring the committee substitute in front of us so that we're discussing that bill instead of with the changes in it instead of 183 if that is okay with you.
Sure. Do you want to make a motion to put it in front of us?
I will make a motion to put Board Bill 183 committee substitute in front of us.
Second.
Great. With the motion in a second, go ahead. Board discussion.
Wonderful. So I'm going to share my screen again. Gave a little bit of, more detail on the bill and some of the numbers based upon some of the feedback that we got last week. Let me get it up here. Oh, what is happening? Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. So the goal of Board Bill 183 committee substitute is to distribute ward capital equitably amongst wards based upon need, and to distribute unencumbered ward capital funds from the old 28 wards amongst the new 14 wards. So right now, 50% of the capital improvement sales tax fund goes to the ward capital improvement account. And that accounts for.
Someone's not muted. Can we please make sure that's?
I'm doing fine. All right. Thank you.
So that accounts for about, give or take a little bit, but about $9.8 million was generated into the ward capital improvement counts from 2022 to 2023. Under Board Bill 183 committee substitute, it creates a base amount where 60% of ward capital funds are distributed equally across accounts. And then using a variable, it creates a need-based score where 40%, where the remaining 40% of funds are then distributed equitably across the new 14 wards. And then the proposal is that there's also what we're calling a transition bonus. So for any unencumbered ward funds that are not encumbered as of April 18th, 2023, 40% of those funds will be equally distributed, and 60% of those funds will be based upon the need score. So the variables that are being used to calculate need is median household income, poverty rate, unemployment rate, number of vacant properties, and educational attainment. Previously, we were hoping to provide a crime score in here as well. After communicating with the police department, it does not seem that that's some data point that we're able to get on a ward by ward basis that could easily be put into this formula. But we do think that together these variables do paint a picture about the needs that various wards have. So the ward that shows the most need for a variable receives 100 points for that variable. And the ward that shows the least need receives 0 points for that variable. And then the closer a ward is to the highest need of threshold, the more points they receive. And the total need score is the average of all of those variables. So what does this look like in terms of breaking it down ward by ward? So when we average those 5 variables and the scores for each ward on those 5 variables, these are the scores that each ward gets. So as you can see, the new 12th ward, 13th ward, 14th ward, 11th ward are the wards that demonstrate the highest amount of need. On the south side, the 3rd ward also exhibits a high amount of need. As of the 23rd of January, there's currently $12.1 million in unencumbered funds in current ward capital accounts. So these are funds that have not been encumbered toward any project. And so the question becomes, what do we do with these unencumbered funds and how do we redistribute them across the new wards if they are not encumbered by the time the new board is seated? So the definition of encumbered is that it meets one of these scenarios, that it has either been set aside for a project which the city has entered into a contract to prior to April 18th, 2023 for the purpose of completing that project in the future, or it has been transferred from a ward sub-account for a project that has been approved by ENA prior to April 18th, 2023. So, having this definition, it would give time for aldermen to encumber funds to set out certain projects. And then those would go through ENA before the new board is seated, and ENA will approve those projects to make sure that those funds are encumbered toward what folks want it to go to under the new reduced wards. So what does this look like in terms of potential allocation? As you can see here, the light blue color is the base allocation that every ward would receive. And then the darker blue is the marginal. So that's the increase that particular wards would get on a based upon that need score on an annual basis. And then the transition bonus, this is the one-time reallocation of ward capital funds to and what it would look like spread across each of the 14 wards. So the minimum that a ward would receive this next year, provided the same amount, provided these funds stay unencumbered, but these funds could be encumbered between now and April 18th, and I would guess that many will be. So the amount of funds that would be reallocated will probably go down. But if this were done today, the least award would receive in this next year would be $806,000. The most would be 2.6 million. So under this, Ward 12 is the ward that has demonstrated the most amount of need. And so it would get the most capital and 1.56 in bonus transition ward capital. And then for the fourth ward, in regular annual ward capital, they would have about 434,000, and the transition bonus would be 372. All right. So that is basically the breakdown on a ward by ward basis in order to be able to redistribute these funds in a more equitable way. And I'm willing to take questions.
Awesome. Okay, we will go through the committee. Sorry, I lost my list here. 1 second. Juggling all these folders we're in today. Great. So Alderwoman Boyd, is she with us yet? No, I don't see her. Alderwoman Davis. Alderwoman Davis, do you have any questions about this committee substitute?
Well, it's a very interesting formula and process, but at the end of the day, it could have been very simple. If you're merging basically two wards together, you could double the amount of the capital allocation, take the additional funds that are available and put it in a pot for larger and/or emergency situations. All of that is just too much drama, but I won't be here. Do what you want to do. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Alderwoman. Alderman Vaccaro.
I look at this And when you talk about doubling the size of the ward that I hope to be the alderman of, we hardly, so I only have $11,000 left in our ward capital in the 23rd ward. The amount that now we all said, oh, we're doubling the size of these wards, so we need to double our paycheck. Oh my God, we'll wring our hands and everything. Yet the new 4th ward is barely going to get the same amount of money that the 23rd ward got, which means the people in that new 4th ward, no matter who the aldermen are, they're not going to have enough money to do anything. I mean, it's terrible. I think I know there's a lot of ARPA funds that are going to be used on the roads, in some of the areas that are in desperate need of that. And I'm all for that. But I don't see why the people in the new 4th ward are going to have to suffer. I don't support this. And again, look at that. The new 4th ward at that list, they get less than nothing. The worst, the lowest. Probably one of the highest tax paying areas in the city. But we'll give them the lowest. Let's give them the least. Maybe they'll pitch in and patch their own road. I think that this is just absolutely terrible. And I agree with Alderwoman Davis when you said the ward capital should double. Everybody said, oh, we need to pay double because it's twice the area. But yet we're going to say, well, as far as that new 4th ward goes, we're not going to worry about that. Yet no projects are going to be able to get done. You're not going to be able to handle the sidewalks, the trees, the dumpsters, the streets. You realize the big streets that go through that new ward that are in desperate need of paving? I have real issues with this. If we're voting on this today, I can't. I mean, and believe me, this is nothing against. I understand that, gee, we need to take care of certain areas, but I also have to defend the area that I would be representing if I win. And the 23rd ward gets about 380,000. Now we're going to say, well, but we're going to take 23 and 24, put it together and add part of 16 and give them about what the 23rd ward got by itself. Good luck. I mean, we might as well just send a letter to the people of Southwest St. Louis over here and say, you guys are doing a really good job and your property values look really nice. But we're not going to give you enough money to do anything to take care of your neighborhood, whether it's speed humps or roads or sidewalks. That's just my say. If we're voting on this, I'm a definite no. This is absolutely, again, telling the people in my neighborhood, hey, you've done a pretty good job and you don't have the whatever, but drive the roads over here. If you're talking about need-based, drive the roads. Look at the potholes, look at the sidewalks. I've been doing that. I've been looking at the areas in the new 4th ward that are in desperate need of paving. I mean, desperate need. And there won't even be enough money to pave a block of it. This is just an absolute, again, I get we're trying to be progressive, but you can't just keep screwing over people that do, Anyway, I am not in support of this the way it is. We've said, gee, we doubled the area, doubled our salaries, but let's don't double the ward capital. So now we won't have enough to take care of our areas. This is a bunch of BS. I'm just going to sit out here. This, I guarantee you, I will be on the press over this, but this is just bizarre. I'm going to mute myself because I'm going to use bad words, which I tend to do.
Okay. I guess as a sponsor of the bill, President Green, do you have do you want to comment on that before we move to the next?
I mean, I'll just say that, you know, we know that equal is never equitable. And we have areas of our city that have been long neglected. We have wards that are now predominantly on the north side that are much larger than south side wards, which means that, you know, a need for more resources to do more sidewalks, to have to cover more streets, to have to cover more lighting. And I don't think it's responsible of us to expect these larger wards to be able to keep up with any of those infrastructure needs if we are only doing things equally and not assigning it based upon need. I think if we're not doing it based upon need, we're setting it up so that we just continue to see lack of investment in infrastructure in areas of our ward that have been, or areas of our city that have already been neglected.
Thanks. Alderwoman Davis, I see your hand, but I want to move through the rest of the committee and then we'll come back for a second round of questions. So if you could hold for me for just a minute, that would be great. Alderwoman Ingracia, you're up next.
Thank you so much. Just wanted to state for the record again, as I did last week and have mentioned in other conversations, that the definition of encumbered it does not work for me. I think other alderpersons are in the same place. I have some constituents who are waiting on some pretty important projects that the city just hasn't been able to move forward with, that will not be entered in under a contract and will not be able to go into a sub account and approved by the Board of E&A prior to April 18th. And I'm still concerned about that. I don't have any further comments. Thanks so much.
If you could get me an amendment on an acceptable definition for encumbered, I'm happy to work on what that definition looks like. We did make it more flexible than what BPS was advocating for in terms of encumbered. They wanted a purchase order to already be or a work order to be issued in order for it to become encumbered. And so we scaled it back from what they were asking for. But if there's a different definition that we think that we can get, I'm happy to amend it and bring it back on Thursday with an updated definition.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Nothing further.
All right, Alderman Bosley, I don't see Alderman Bosley. Alderman Middlebrook, I don't see Alderman Todd.
I don't have any questions, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Alderman Page.
Yes, thank you very much. I will rise in support of equitable versus equal ward capital distribution. But as I've spoken ad nauseum in the past, I'm just very concerned about this getting funds properly encumbered in a timely manner. And my example that I've used and I will continue to use is getting street repair and paving done. And that's been a continuous problem for me because of my work with my constituents in my different neighborhoods. We identified a number of street repair and paving needs. I put a plan together and put it forward to Streets, BPS, everybody else who would listen. And we have had no movement on it. And I'm just very concerned that the clock will run out and the part of my ward capital that I had earmarked, not encumbered, but earmarked for street repair and paving will not get acted on and will enter that nether region of the elections. And I don't know what's going to happen. So I'm very concerned about that. But as a general principle, I am all for equitable versus equal distribution of ward capital funds going forward based on need. With that, I yield back.
Great, thank you, Alderman Page. It looks like Alderman Stevens is not here today. Alderwoman Schweitzer.
Thank you so much. One question I do have, I'm hearing need being discussed as something about size of the wards. And I'm looking at the board bill and I'm trying to decide, see if size of ward is actually one of the things taken into account?
It is not, but if you look at the wards that have the highest need through the formula, they're also the largest wards.
Okay, that's interesting.
The ones that have had the most population decline, the highest vacancy, which means that they end up having larger boundaries for the most part. The third ward would be the exception to that.
Yeah, I'd be interested in, I am not supportive of this board bill for the main reason of the 13th ward, and I know the future first ward, which I'm, live in, will need every dollar of the ward capital that it is allocated in order to meet very, very basic infrastructure needs within the boundaries of the ward. This is moving money that is not enough money to begin with for what needs to happen in order to get all of the roads and roads paved, sidewalks fixed, all of that. It's never been enough money to carry out what it's asked to carry out, and then to further make it more difficult for some wards to meet those basic needs. It doesn't make any sense to me. So I'm a no on this right now. I would be interested in seeing some actual written definition about size of ward into the need calculation, just because if this is in perpetuity, what's going to be happening? If this were to pass, ideally that piece wouldn't just fall out, that it's about infrastructure needs too, because at the end of the day, this is about paving, sidewalks, trees, dumpsters, parks, some very basic things that need to be happening in each ward. Thanks for your time.
Great. Thank you, Alderman Schweitzer. Alderman Gross.
Yeah, I'm kind of on the fence. I'm kind of going back and forth. I understand Alderwoman from the 13th's concerns kind of about the metrics. It would seem to me that and I get the fact that it makes sense that those happen to be the biggest ones, but I mean, if this is about infrastructure, I mean, could we have metrics that's miles of square miles, miles of streets, miles of sidewalks, number of lights, and then you can portion it that way, and then I mean that's a lot more of a makes sense to that point. I'm also I certainly definitely understand the equity in the other kind of metric, in the equity. I always think that one of the biggest kinds of inequitable parts of ward capital is that a lot of wards have special taxing districts and some don't, or some do and some don't. So it's that's another source of capital that a ward has. If that could be a metric, I feel like that'd be more relevant than unemployment or rates or educational attainment rates. That seems not as related to this. And then the only thing the other thing I would say is I'm not sure how I feel about this for the past funds. Going forward, okay, if we want to make the decision as a board going forward, that makes sense. But, I think that if these funds were distributed one way beforehand, and I feel like we go back and redistribute them now, I think that might rub some people the wrong way that might not otherwise have had a problem with it. And, I also think, there's a pretty big jump, I feel like, from 800,000 to on the low end to 2.6 million on the high end. I think that we should, right now, if everything is completely equal and we want to start, making it more equitable instead of equal, I think that, 800 to 2.6 million is a pretty big jump to just do that right off the start. And, maybe we can, and I don't know how the math would work if you shrink the percentage at the start, instead of 40%, maybe it's a lower percentage. So it makes it a little, a little more equal, a little less equitable, but balance it a little bit more either way. But I think though, I'll probably, if you ask me how I vote today, I'll probably say yes, because I'm interested to see how the full board would hear it. I'd be interested in the discussion that we could have in front of the board. on it, but I'm not completely sold as is.
I do want to speak a little bit to the equitable distribution. So when we broke down the amount of unencumbered funds per ward, if we were to just do things more equally, then we would be redistributing a lot of north side funds to south side wards. And I don't think that's a fair way to go about doing this. About 54% of the unencumbered ward funds right now are in north side wards. And so doing anything that would send higher need wards that are more struggling with infrastructure needs into more stable areas of the city, I would not support that as the bill sponsor.
And that makes sense.
Okay. It looks like Alderwoman Walker is not here. So Alderwoman Davis, did you still have comments you wanted to make?
Yeah, I'm still, and I appreciate the other comments because it took me back to when you structure something in order to have equity, you cannot go to the extreme with that process. The process has to have the ability to be fluid and move where actual need is. You can't predetermine that. You never know what is going to occur in a ward. You never know what type of development may come forth in a ward that would need some assistance. So to put those kind of numbers out there, it would be better to have a fund that is set aside to get additional money. And yeah, and I'll speak of the proposed 11th ward. Geographically, it is larger. And so, yes, it would have more need for street repairs and those kinds of things. But equitably, for the basic needs of any ward, they're all about the same. The wear and tear of trash cans, all those things. So you need to have those numbers that are more basic, but then you can also have a pot of money where you can go to for other projects that you can get funds for. But I wouldn't put all that money in wards that may or may not ever use it. You're just setting yourself up for even more drama. And we've never had a problem in the past at the Board of Aldermen where if I needed some additional funds, I could always get it from a ward that had funds that they probably would never use. And so we have done that. We have shared those funds. You can ask either for them to be loaned to you or to be given to you. And most times when it's loaned to you, you never pay it back because you don't have the opportunity to, and they don't need it. So it has worked out just fine. Plus, we've all come together on special projects that we wanted to see move forward in the city, like the school that we had downtown at Blewett School, Innovative Concept Academy. And almost every alderperson, at least all the African-American aldermen, plus some others, put funds into that project. Like there was some conversation, I wasn't available for it, for the museum on St. Louis Avenue. In years past, we've all come together and put money there to help them with projects. So there's a more basic, easier way than this complicated thing that's going to get real messy in the future. And I would just, ask that you reevaluate. Thank you.
So I do want to correct something there. These are not predetermined set numbers. The formula would be used prior to ward capital meetings every single year. So the formula would always be the same, but that would account for changes over time. So if a ward over time demonstrates less need, then their share of funds the next year might be less. Whereas if another ward sees much more disinvestment over that year and their need-based score goes up, then they would get allocated more revenue. So it's done on a formulaic basis, not a predetermined set, number every year.
Alderwoman Spencer, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Madam Acting Chair. I guess with regards to the calculations, as I'm reading in the board bill, I share concerns about the encumbered funds for one. I've been working on encumbering funds since June of last year. I don't see any end in sight to some simple paving in my ward, funds getting encumbered. I hate seeing my ward capital funds left every cycle, because I've been asking for projects that haven't been funded for so long. It's mind blowing, quite frankly. And so, I would like to see, the ability for those of us who want to encumber funds to be able to earmark them and set them for the projects that we've promised our residents we're going to do. There's a real problem. There's a lack of planning, staff that could help us do projects. For me in my ward, I didn't want to just willy-nilly choose things that an elected official, myself, wanted to do. I engaged the planning department and asked for recommendations for the best ways to improve safety and mobility in the 20th ward. That was very important to me. I couldn't do that myself, not having been trained in that area, nor do I think it's necessarily the best for us to do these things without planning. And we just simply don't have enough staff for that. It makes it very, very difficult, very time consuming to do. So I'd like to see some concessions for that. But number two, one of the things I see missing really is, the need as far as the size, the geographic size, and the number of visitors that are coming, looking at, for example, areas of downtown, looking at Soulard Market and other city facilities that need a lot of infrastructure dollars that serve a lot of people outside of their districts. I think that needs to be taken into consideration, because without the funds to be able to invest in those amenities and those facilities that serve residents outside of the district that live in that district, we're already very, very hamstrung. I mean, the other problem I see with this, and I do very much support the concept and the idea, and I want to thank the president for reminding us how important it is to be thinking in terms of equity versus equality. That's such an important concept here, but the reality is, as the alderwoman from the 13th pointed out, these ward capital funds are not enough as it is. And, we have such a high amount of need. We really need to identify a long-term solution for funding streets and infrastructure that is beyond this $9 million. Most cities have twice as much just in streets. And this is a pot of money for everything, as we've mentioned, from dumpsters to parks to streets to sidewalks. We require our residents to pay half of. That program in and of itself puts at disadvantage those areas that need most. I mean, requiring residents to pay 50% of a sidewalk in a neighborhood where residents are really struggling to make basic needs met is a tall ask. I think we should be looking at ways that we should be investing in our streets, including the pot of money that generates money on our streets, our parking fund. I just think that we are tapping into a resource that's limited and not nearly enough as it is. And we should be thinking in terms of what is, what is the use base right now as well. Obviously, thinking in terms of not just the residents who live there, but the residents who visit and rely on the amenities that those wards have. Some wards have more parks and more rec centers. I know, having represented the Marquette Rec Center, how expensive it is to invest in a very large rec center that serves way more than just the residents of the 20th ward currently. But how important it is to do that, recognizing the 20th ward had four parks actually, and the neighboring ward, the 25th, had none. But certainly our parks serve those residents. So it becomes a little difficult to to calculate the need when amenities that the city owns serve residents outside those that just live in that the sort of arbitrary political boundaries.
Thanks. And just to be clear, I think this conversation is an and not an or. And so our office is working, and one of our priorities through this budget, this next budget cycle, is to find a dedicated funding mechanism for streets. Because we all know that street paving coming out of this account does not nearly get us to where it needs to be in terms of those types of infrastructure costs. And we also need to be figuring out, you raised a really great point about the 50-50 sidewalk. And, you know, in some communities, paying that 50% is not possible. And so we're always setting up communities to be behind. So I think we're trying to make it an and. The clock that we're running up against is we do need to make some action on specifying how these funds are distributed before the new board takes effect, because we'll be going right into those board capital meetings almost as soon as a new board is seated. And so I do think that new board will still probably want to make changes for this, but we need to figure out, you know, what is the interim solution for how we can allocate these funds. And I do think geographic size is something we can ask SLDC, but I think that is something that they should be able to factor in. I don't know how much that'll change some of these need scores, because just looking at the ones that have the highest need scores are also many of the wards that have the largest geography. But we will get that, and we will see how we can get that incorporated, and then we'll figure out a different definition for encumbered. And if you have suggestions on how that could be worded or things that you would like to see in it, please send that to myself and Christina. And we're continuing to work on trying to find a definition that works for older people and also works for BPS.
I have some questions. I'm gonna take a pause here and ask some questions on my own here as well. So there, you mentioned SLDC, and that jumped out at me on this board bill as well, that we were delegating this calculation to SLDC. Could you talk a little bit about why we're going to them and not to the planning department or something that's actually a division of the city government?
They have had the capacity to be, and the data to be able to do this, basically. And so they've been the ones supporting in pulling the data and running the data for it.
Okay. And then I just want to flag, there was a little bit of conversation in the chat here, but we cannot take special business districts or special taxing districts into account, because that is, they're paying the same amount of base rate taxes that everyone else is. And so if we take them into account, then that's actually unlawful, I think. And even in, I represent part of South Grand, and improvements to the infrastructure there have to come out of ward capital as well. So that's something there. But that leads me to ward capital is doing too much. We are asking too much of this fund. And, it's one of the things that I talk to residents about when they talk about the fee, or that increase in fees for refuse collection when we added dumpsters, when we added recycling. And part of that is it's supposed to pay for dumpster replacement, but we've gotten to a point where we also need that money. We need more money that is going in that is being collected in that fee. And so wards have started paying for extra dumpsters out of ward capital money. It was never designed for that. I know that particularly with sidewalks, we have an issue with ADA compliance, and we need to get those up to date. And honestly, like was identified earlier, doing it 50-50 and only relying on people to report their own sidewalks and then have the funds to be able to pay 50-50 means we have patchwork sidewalks that don't match, that don't we've got some that are getting cleaned up and some that aren't, and that hurts everybody's accessibility throughout these wards. And so that's part of the reason I'm glad that the board bill that I believe is in Alderwoman Davis's committee has dedicated money for 50-50 sidewalks, that we can take a chunk off of that. And maybe we need to look at funding otherwise. What I would love to see out of ward capital going forward, and this won't be in my time, is that we reevaluate how and what these funds are used for. If there are special projects, so we're taking a particular street and we're working on a bike path, or we're working on beautification, or we're working on pedestrian access through an otherwise gated street or something like that. That seems like a great use of ward capital, of sort of ward by ward. Things that need more public engagement, that need more community engagement, should maybe be under ward capital. But if the overall maintenance of city infrastructure should be handled by city funds, and should just be taken care of. But I also know that there's some distrust in parts of the city as to whether or not they're going to be prioritized in getting that work done. So that is a piece that I think we need to be cautious of as well, is so not just to put this all back in one fund without streets having the capacity or having the trust to be able to administer the needs equitably as the needs arise, really. And that also does lead me to I will work with Alderwoman Ingracia and maybe Alderman Spencer as well on this definition about encumbered, because some of the things that we've run into over this last year is streets said, hold on, everything has to have an engineering study now. And so discussions that we had, I'm going on a year now of discussions where we met with streets and BPS and the community at a particular place where there was supposed to be bump outs put in, supposed to be a crosswalk put in for a school. They said, well, you can't just do that anymore. We have to have a full engineering study. But I have not yet gotten word back as to whether or not we have the engineering ability to have those studies. So I cannot encumber the funds that we promised more than a year ago with the community that we were going to get this done, because that engineering study has not happened. And so there's a capacity issue that we're running into here. I haven't gotten a full report on how much money is needed for 50-50 sidewalks in my ward, and then speed humps have to come out as well. And so it's all this it's this piecemeal approach that we're relying on the streets department, on BPS, on planning, on whoever, to respond to 28 of us individually and 28 different sets of needs and types of communication with our constituents. And there's just got to be a better way forward. So I'm appreciative that we have to do something about ward capital, particularly what's left over as this starts the new session, that we should set some direction for how money is allocated going forward. But I'm hoping that the new folks who are coming in are able to take a much more holistic look at this than we're able to do in this short amount of time. And might I add, this is something that we might have been able to address 3 or 4 years ago, when the previous alderwoman from the 28th proposed a meeting about how ward reduction was going to affect us. So this is just one of those things where if we had some more time, we could probably have ironed some more of this out. But if you have any response to that, President Green, I'm happy to take it. Otherwise, I'll move on to the next question.
Just that I agree. I mean, this fund was intended to be a special projects fund, not a fund for everyday city services. And our goal needs to get it back to being that. And so I think we have short-term goals and long-term goals, right? The longer-term goal needs to be transitioning back so that it's city departments that are responsible for paving streets and doing that work without relying solely on ward capital to get it done. And we have the shorter term goal of, we have ward consolidation coming up in April and have to figure out how we are redistributing these funds by that date. And so I think we need to look at this both from what do we need to get done between now and April, and then what What do we fight for throughout the budget process and beyond that can get us back to a place where this is more of a special projects fund and not a fund all city services fund.
With that, we'll go to hands raised, Alderwoman Schweitzer.
Thank you so much. So in the encumber definition that exists now, I had a question about the second option, that it was approved sub-accounts. So something that would be qualified as an approved sub-account would be if you have funds in your 50/50 sidewalk sub-account.
Correct.
Okay, so you wouldn't necessarily, because right now, that's where all of our 13th Ward capital any funds left over are going into the 13th Ward 50/50 sub-account. And because there's over $400,000 worth left in the 13th Ward, $130,000 going into it isn't going to solve the problem. But yeah, and I hear you about addressing the long-term issues, and I agree that this money should be coming out of some dedicated funding stream for paving and for sidewalks. Perhaps sidewalk work should be paid for completely separately in a different way. The sewer lateral insurance program, for example, is something where funds go into that program so that if there is an issue, or not sewer lateral insurance, but in the water bill, sewer lateral work is, there's a fee for that that goes on to that, and it's a small dollar amount every year. So if something were to happen, there's money for a bigger project. And I feel like sidewalk work could be a similarly budgeted for item. Of course, that would require a different bill, all outside of what we're talking about now. But I see sort of two things. One is this isn't the long-term solution of needing a dedicated funding stream isn't going to be fixed by the time this ward capital bill needs to be passed. And therefore, in my mind, it can't be done to wards that this isn't covering at all to suddenly be asked to do with half as much money as they would be getting if it would just been divided 14 ways, when there isn't right now a long-term plan in action for a better funding stream, which I agree is needed, but it's not here now, and that's not fair to the people of the future first ward, who are largely my constituents, and the future second ward, future third ward, who are my constituents now, to do with less. Then in thinking about the transition money, I see of that as sort of two separate things. One is how will this money be distributed going forward, and two is how these funds that aren't allocated or aren't encumbered will be distributed. And I think breaking those conversations into two separate things may make more sense to me. I know that that could be done in this bill, where it's divided 14 ways for future allocations, and then the unencumbered funds being divided in the ways that you've laid out might make me more likely to vote for this bill. But so I just wanted to make that point, and I appreciate the time you've taken to do this. Thank you.
All right. Alderman Gross looks like it has his hand up, but President Green, I am going to need to jump off of here in a couple of minutes. So is there someone else that you would like to take over, or do you just want to take back over as chair if we're not going to be voting today?
We're not voting. I can take back over. And if Alderman Gross is the last comment, because I also have a 4 o'clock meeting that is not at City Hall. So
Yeah, I do too. Actually, I need to go. I'll go really quick then. I just wanted to say that I appreciated the comments about, needing other funds like the street paving fund that shouldn't be part of ward capital. Completely agree with that. That's probably the bigger thing we need to look at. The only other thing I'll say is I agree with the Alderman from the 19th. I thought that was, I don't know why I didn't think of it before. We could, instead of distributing this money and giving different, amounts to different wards, maybe we just take a chunk of it and put it in like a fund that's like an insurance, rainy day, like the extra fund. So then if a ward runs out and, if the north side wards, have more things they need to be spending their money on and burn through their money, well, there's the pot there that, they can keep spending on if it's needed. And, I don't, maybe there's the devil in the details about who approves those expenditures, but I don't know if it would be too controversial. But I just thought that was an interesting idea, and I hadn't thought of it before. So something to consider maybe.
If there's nothing further, I do think we need to vote this out of committee on Thursday, in whatever form that we can make some consensus around for what this looks like and efforts to be able to get this in place before the new board. So if you do have further amendments, or things that you want to be seen, if you could please get that to Christina. I know for sure the encumbered amounts, will also touch base with SLDC and see how we might be able to factor in a square mileage calculation into this as well. And maybe we also look at the funding formula as, what would it look like if it was, 70-30, 80-20, and not just, 60-40 to, so that we're still ensuring that wards that have more needs, are getting more funding, while also making sure that we're not, completely hamstringing, wards that, have less need identified through this score. So I think we can play around with what the numbers look like to figure out a formula that works for everyone. All right, so with that, I will entertain a motion to excuse, and I'm sorry, I don't have the list in front of me of who is not here today.
Alderwoman Boyd, Alderman Bosley, Alderwoman Middlebrook.
All right, I will entertain a motion to excuse the aforementioned alder people.
You
You
can
don't
do
need a
that.
motion, Madam Chair.
I'm sorry, there's multiple people.
You can just
talking.
do that. Yeah.
Like to make a motion to excuse the aforementioned alder people. I can't remember who it was now.
You do not need a motion for that, Madam Chair. You have the ability to do that yourself.
Okay, let's excuse those members, and then I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All right, we will see you on Thursday.
Thank you.